Well, welcome to another episode of the Residential Developer Podcast. I'm the host. My name's Nathan Battishall, and I'm really excited about today's episode. It's been a little time in the making. It's been something that I know a lot of our listeners have been waiting for. I've well and truly been waiting for it, and that is the launch of the New South Wales Pattern Book, or the Pattern Book designs that have been released by New South Wales Planning. This has been something that we've been waiting for. Obviously, we've had a whole bunch of episodes where we have talked about the LMR, which came into effect in February. Now we see the launch of the pattern design booklets, and obviously there was a lot of unknowns as to what these pattern designs were going to look like, what it was going to mean from a planning point of view, and now these designs have been launched, and we can now get excited to see that there's a CDC pathway now by using these pattern books. And that was the unknown, which is why we obviously didn't, we had mixed information that we were getting back. So now these designs have come into effect. It was obviously launched, it was launched prior to the July 30, when it's now come into effect. It's now implemented into the SEP, and it's now a pathway where you can get designs fast-tracked in the LMR under the low-rise, the low and mid-rise housing under a fast-track CDC pathway. So I just want to do a quick high-level episode, and we're going to be doing some episodes in the coming months where we're going to break down all of those pattern designs as well. I'm going to be quite interactive, where we're going to share some slideshows. We're going to put together some information. I just want to drip feed it over time so I can put the energy and the effort and time into sharing that. We've got a couple of guests that specialise and are very switched on, and leaders in that LMR space, have been well versed in the new pattern books. We're just going to break it down just to help yourselves as people who are passionate about doing small residential developments and investment-based projects, that being especially within this space of the LMR. I know there's a lot of listeners and a lot of people out there who either have sites or are very interested in looking into doing some projects within the LMR. And obviously, if you cannot bypass council, it's sometimes very feasible. So I want to break that down. So just so you're aware and so you know, as of now, at the time of this episode, we're now in August, the start of August, and we are now at the point where the LMR under the plan book or the design booklets or the pattern designs is now in effect, meaning that as of now, you can use the pattern designs within appropriate LMR areas and gain a fast-track CDC approval. So just for time's sake, I want to encourage you, if you haven't listened yet, go back and listen to some of the LMR episodes where we break down the LMR for duplex/semi-detached dwellings, for terraces, for manor houses, and you can really get a good understanding of the type of areas, the mapping, the zoning, the height limits, all those different elements. So just so you know, under the LMR, there's two different pathways. Now, these pattern designs, essentially what the government released, and I know you would have heard me share this in previous episodes before the pattern designs were released, that my concern was it was a bit of an unknown as to whether there was a fast-track approval system that was going to come into play. And my concern was that we were going to see a bottleneck in an already often constrained LGAs and councils across some of these areas in New South Wales, where these LMR projects were all going to have to go down the DA pathway. And we can see now the exciting thing about the LMR, the pattern designs, is that there is now a fast-track approval method via CDC if you meet the criteria. And if those pattern designs can fit within the criteria of that particular site. Which is exciting, meaning that some of the bottlenecks in council we won't have, and it means that hopefully, as per what the Minns government intended for this LMR, was that we can deal with some of the shortage of housing in well-populated and well-defined areas where they want to see population growth and housing growth, that we can start to actually chip away at some of the housing shortages and rental shortages that we are seeing across New South Wales. So it's very excited. Essentially, these pattern designs, it's a set of 8 designs. They've been designed by prominent architects and well-known architects. It's been an extensive process. And look, myself and the team, my team in our firm, we've gone through a lot of those pattern designs. And look, they're quite good designs. They're quite functional. I want to break down, and we'll go into further episodes where we'll break down the different types of projects, and we can talk a little bit about the pros and the cons and what I'm seeing. And look, at the end of the day, it's not just about what I'm seeing. I'm obviously just sharing some insights and some thoughts. Firstly, as someone who is in the development space myself, and secondly, as someone who's obviously in the design, the planning space as well, where obviously I see both sides of the coin and I'm able to really look at things through both lenses and both angles. So I just want to use these episodes to really just break it down, help people better understand it, knowing that there's a lot of people that don't either have the time or they don't have the knowledge or experience to be able to break down some of these new reforms that come into play. So these pattern designs, we can see that there's 8 designs in total. There's 2 semi-detached designs, so semi-detached being duplex, what we traditionally call a duplex or an attached dual occupancy. So essentially, a semi-detached being that it's 2 dwellings on one lot, and obviously you can subdivide. We see that there is 3 options for terraces. A really interesting one, and I'm excited in about a month's time I'm going to be bringing an episode around the row home design, which I think is one of the really exciting opportunities. Essentially, row home, it's not a term that's often used, if ever. I've never heard that term used, but essentially row homes are like a series of townhouses running from the front of the block to the back with a driveway down one side. So your typical townhouse site that you'd see. I think that's a really exciting one because there's never been a CDC pathway for that type of development before. And then we see the manor house, and obviously I shared an episode not long ago around manor houses, and my concern with manor houses being the fact that they're class 2, very heavily restricted and constrained. So I'll be very interested to see how many manor houses get done under this pattern design, because it's still a class 2 design, and I'm very interested to see how they're going to achieve that 10-day approval for the manor house, being the fact that it's a class 2 design. So watch this space, keep an eye out. But essentially there's those 8 pattern designs. So you've got 8 designs to pick from. So essentially, if you want to do a semi-detached dwelling, you've got 2 design books to pick from. You can pick one of those and see if it fits on the site, to determine if it's feasible or possible to go down that pathway. And at the moment, New South Wales planning, the state government has a really good initiative where you can pay $1 for that design. Now, I just want to debunk a myth. Like, some people think that you can just literally download a design and then upload it straight to a certifier. That's not the case. You still need to provide the same documentation to a private certifier that you would normally for any type of CDC project. So yes, you can buy the license to this pattern design that suits that site, but essentially you're still required to get all the documentation carried out, documented, obviously set up for the site to be put on top of a survey, all of the typical documentation, both for approval but also for the builder for construction. Essentially what this pattern design booklet does, it regulates for the government, state government, essentially a fast-track approval pathway with a known series of designs, that being 8 different designs that they've rubber-stamped, that they've said that they've deemed appropriate within the LMR, provided it meets all of the site constraints to fit that site. And essentially you can then use that, you have a permission and licensing to use that design. So it's, at the moment, until January, mid-January, I'm hearing, 2026, those designs can be purchased for $1. Now, when we say purchase for $1, it doesn't mean that you can purchase, for example, one of the semi designs or one of the terrace designs and use it over and over and over and over. You need to purchase it for that site. So when you go in and purchase it, and look, even ourselves, we've already got clients that have purchased sites in the LMR. We're already in the process of getting some designs underway under the LMR using the pattern book. And we've also got some clients where we're going down the pathway of DA in the LMR, and I'll be able to explain that in later episodes as to why we're going DA under the LMR versus the fast track CDC with the pattern design book. So essentially you just paid $1. You need to put in the lot number, the DP and the address of that particular site. So it needs to be purchased for that site-specific site. And what will happen after mid-January 2026, the designs will go up to $1,000. So it'll go from $1 to $1,000 per design. And look, there's a lot of people saying, oh, you'll save $20,000. Now, look, you definitely will save money because you'll save a lot of money on like being someone who works in that space of planning, design. Obviously, you can get it more drafted rather than design because obviously generally an architect or a building designer will, if they're doing a site-specific project, they'll be custom designing something to suit that site with a blank canvas. In this case, you're getting a design that needs to fit to that site. You're just essentially getting it all drafted up and documented with the construction documentation and detailing to A, get it approved by the certifier, and B, so that your builder and your team on site can build it as per the documentation. So yes, you'll definitely save money on the plans and designs, and yes, it will speed that process up. So that's just something to be aware of. You can't just keep using that design over and over and over on multiple sites. You need to pay per site. So once it comes into effect that it's $1,000, if you do 10 projects a year, you're paying $10,000 essentially because you need to buy that license for that site to be able to use that pattern book design. As to what the price will do in the future, it's an unknown, but we do know that it's $1 at the moment up until mid-January 2026. So there's time to really jump in, and obviously they're trying to really push this type of project, obviously to deal with some of the housing shortages that will come into effect. So essentially what will happen when you find a site, you need to obviously make sure that that particular pattern book fits within that site. And again, I'll do some episodes where we really break down each of the pattern book designs, and we'll be able to really walk through what you need to look for, because there's a whole lot of things that will, just because it's within the LMR doesn't necessarily mean that a pattern book is going to work on that site. We've already had some sites where, unfortunately for clients, they can't go down that fast track CDC pathway for various different reasons, whether that be overlays on the site. Obviously, under this fast track CDC approval pathway, you still need to make sure. So if it's flood affected, bushfire affected, if it's got a heritage overlay, or if it's a heritage item, if it's got contamination or coastal hazard, a lot of these areas straight away will mean that you can't go down that fast track CDC pathway and you use a pattern book. We've got some sites, for example, where there's some of those constraints in there. So provided, for example, bushfire, we can still use the LMR uplift, but we need to do it as a DA. And obviously being the fact that in this case it's a semi-detached dwelling, we've got to make sure that we achieve it's not more than about 29 bushfire rating on that site. But straight away that discounts a CDC and it discounts being able to use the pattern book, means a DA. But again, it's exciting still because it means that it's a site that was not previously able to be developed for anything other than one house. It can still be a duplex, but it has to go to the DA pathway. But the good, exciting thing is you can use some of the LMR uplifts of like lot size, lot width, height, FSR, some of those benefits. So look, there's still positive things as a result of that. So essentially using the pattern book, the pattern design is provided that the site is suitable, making sure that you tick all those boxes. Essentially, there's an opportunity now to go down a fast-track CDC approval pathway. Now, essentially what they're saying, it's a 10-day approval as opposed to the usual 20-day approval that they allow for a traditional CDC. They're saying it's a 10-day CDC approval pathway. Now, keep in mind, you need to have a 7-day neighbour notification. So what will happen is that the certifier will have to notify the neighbours that you are doing, for example, a particular project using a pattern book in the LMR. They've got 7 days. They get notified. They've got 7 days to make their submission or objection to the certifier. So look, that's obviously going to help regulate that people aren't firstly cutting corners, that they're not changing the design, because that's a big thing. And we're going to talk about some of the constraints around the LMR. We're going to talk about some of the pros and some of the cons around using this design pattern book. But one big thing is that neighbours have 7 days to object. So if you're cutting corners, you need to look at things like overshadowing. You need to make sure you comply. You need to make sure you're not cutting corners. And look, there'll be some people out there that will be trying to get in the pockets and in the hands of certifiers to try and exploit this new opportunity under the LMR. But I think the big thing will be is that people still have that opportunity to object, and you need to make sure that you do your thorough due diligence to ensure that the pattern book is suitable for that site, that it works, that it's possible, that it's feasible, because people will have that opportunity to make their objections. So look, I think it's an exciting opportunity. It's an opportunity to look to do projects and developments in areas that you may not have otherwise been able to do projects and developments. Obviously, there's a limited amount of designs. And look, it's like anything. Like, you can look at this as an opportunity, or you can look at it as, as a hindrance. And look, I've heard, and obviously I'm in both the development space, but I'm in the planning and the design space too. And I've even had people say, "Oh, look, are you worried that it's, this type of thing is doing you out of business?" And I'm like, no, it's not, because the reality is a whole new bunch of sites have opened up that would not have otherwise been opened. For example, a lot of these areas within the LMR may not have in the past been able to do multi-dwelling, that being terraces or row homes or townhouses, as we traditionally call them, but even duplexes. Like, all of a sudden 12-metre wide sites have opened up and 450 square metre blocks that would not have otherwise been able to be possible to do semi-detached dwellings or duplexes. So I think it's exciting. It's an opportunity that's opened up. And look, it's just debunking the myth that you still need, whether it be a building designer, an architect, or a draftsperson, or a builder involved to be able to prepare the application and the documentation, and to be able to execute the documentation and getting the approvals. So look, for me, I think that's a big thing. So look, there's just some caveats I want to share about, and when I say caveats, they're just elements that you need to be aware of, that before you just go and blindly buy an LMR site where you can use a pattern book, to actually be right on top of the knowledge base of understanding of what you can and can't do, and what's possible and not possible under this new opportunity within the LMR. So for today's purposes, I'm only talking about the pattern design pathway via CDC. We're not going to talk about LMR under the DA pathway. We've shared a lot about that in past episodes. This is more now around the pattern designs that have come out, which enable the pathway of a fast-track CDC approval. So look, one big thing to really look at, or one caveat to consider, is that these pattern designs are locked in, okay? You're constrained, or you're limited by what you can actually put within those designs. So those designs can't be modified. Now, the thing I do like about the pattern designs, and again, we're still very much getting our head fully around the adaptations and the changes, but I've spent probably as much time as many people really studying each of those designs and studying the opportunities for changes and modifications. And the good thing is, under each of those 8 pattern designs, there is adaptations that you can make. You can swap rooms out, you can add additional rooms and take rooms out. So, for example, there's 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom, 2-bedroom options on some of the designs. There's options to, switch out a bathroom. There's options to have like a utility room. There's even options to remove a garage in some of those sites. For example, the terraces where you're not required to have garaging for each dwelling, where you can even swap out a garage in some of those suburban areas where people may not necessarily want vehicle space, and you can have an activity room, or you can have different utility type rooms, or almost like a second type living area. So there is some flexibility there, but it's obviously not the flexibility you're ever going to get with a custom blank canvas. And I think that's something to be on top of and aware of. The different pattern designs have different sizing in terms of the block width, but also the square meterage of the designs. So it's important to really understand what you can and can't do. Just because under a DA you might be able to fit a 5-bedroom semi-detached dwelling, you may not be able to fit that under the pattern book. So it's important to look at the pros and the cons, especially when you're negotiating your purchase or acquisition of that site, because the pathway you pick will obviously determine whether you can try and get some bigger terms, some better terms on the site. So it's important to look at if it's a better, more feasible option to go down the DA pathway on the LMR, you might want to try and get longer terms. If you can go the fast track CDC and the pattern designs are suitable to that site and give you the highest and best use on that site and stack up from a feasibility point of view, I think that's very key as well. So look, I think that's important. Just know that you can't custom design these pattern designs. And look, I'm not naive to think that there'll be some really, unethical people out there, whether it be designer/certifier, that might try and exploit this. But look, at the end of the day, you have to notify the neighbours too, so they have an opportunity to object and to speak in. And you run the risk if you really push the envelope and push the boundary, and you're breaching copyright. And that's where I think you got to be very careful, because part of paying that fee at this point, it's $1. In time, it'll be $1,000. Essentially, you're getting permission from the New South Wales state government to use the licensing of that design. You got to remember the design is owned by either the designer, or in this case, it's Planning New South Wales. I don't know how they've done it, whether they've done like a licensing agreement with those individual 8 architects that designed those pattern designs, but there's obviously an agreement in place, and you can't go and add additional rooms or to change the facades or to do things outside of that scope. And when a certifier is assessing the CDC approval of these pattern designs, they're required to cross-check those designs against the pattern guides, against the pattern design guide for that project, and they have to assess it on that measure. I think it's very vital. It's like anything, any new code that comes into effect, anything new that comes in, it's always going to be scrutinised and looked over, and just for quality assurance. So I think it's important just to make sure you don't cross that line, don't cross that boundary, don't run that risk of moving out of that space. So just know that you are constrained by the design. You have to follow that site. Now, one thing you'll notice, if each of those pattern designs, you're required to work with it within a particular slope on that site. So certain parts of New South Wales within the LMR are dead flat. Now, obviously, a flat site or a reasonably flat site is most suitable for these pattern designs. Some of them you can work in a 1 metre of fall across that site or across that project. Others you can go 1.5, 2, 2.5. But just know, if you're dealing with those slopier sites where there could be 3, 4, 5, 6 metres across front to back on that site, just know that a lot of these designs will not work. So it's very key to look at the slope of the site, look at the contours on the site, and to really get a good understanding within those pattern designs, because the good thing about the pattern designs, it'll show you what slope you can work with and contend with on each of those sites. So when you're looking at a site, you need to look at, has that been allowed for within that pattern design to be able to split the block or stagger it, or to work within a split on that site. And the good thing is that the documentation is very clear and it's very informative. It's very easy to understand in terms of when you get that documentation. And the good thing is you can get it all free, and we'll put the link in the show notes so you can access the pattern book link on Planning New South Wales, so that you can actually see, and you can download the PDF on each of those 8 designs. You can download a really detailed PDF which gives you a lot of informative information on each of those designs. So that's very key. Don't think that you can do a pattern design on an extremely sloped site. Okay, it's very important to look at that aspect of it. Now, the other thing is, just because it says you can do a 10-day approval, don't discount the fact there's still some things some hoops that you need to jump. And I know I've spoken about this in previous episodes, but under a CDC, a lot of these LMR sites are littered with trees, of which a lot of trees are native trees. So a lot of these trees can't be removed under CDC. A lot of them can't be removed under an exempt development. A lot of them may require where you need to design around those trees, or you need to apply for a tree removal permit. Now, the problem is if you need to design around particular native trees that can't be removed, again, just remember under the pattern book, you can't modify that design. So if you need to just slightly change one side of the duplex or the semi or the row home to work around a tree protection zone or a structural root zone of a tree, don't forget you can't custom design these pattern designs. So the trees on your site, if they can't be removed, can actually dictate the pathway you need to go. It may even hinder a DA pathway by custom designing something to suit that site, like you would a traditional development where trees can dictate what the yield of what you can do and can't do on a site. But it's very important to look at that. So when you're looking at a site, it's important to get good, thorough due diligence from a respected and reliable and consistent and skilled arborist that can give you information on the trees, what's exempt, what's not exempt, what the health of that tree is, the likelihood of removal. But again, don't forget, if there are trees that you need to apply for tree removal permits, you're in the hands of council. Okay, so that 10 day is a best case scenario, because most sites you're going to often have to apply for whether it be a tree removal permit. A lot of councils, you're going to need to get a Section 138 for your driveways. If it's a semi, you might have to relocate a driveway. If it's row homes, again, you may have to relocate. Or if it's terraces, you may need multiple driveway crossovers. And then again, you're in the hands of council. How many driveway crossovers are they going to allow? And is there anything hindering those crossovers? And again, you've got time that comes into play. Some councils take as little as a week, some take 2 weeks, some take a month, some even take, upwards of, 4 to 8 weeks for Section 138. So you need to factor that in as well, the time involved to get your Section 138s. And let's face it, probably 80% of sites you're going to need a Section 138. You may get lucky and you've already got an existing driveway in place that doesn't need to be relocated, that's already there. You can get lucky in that aspect. So that's key. Obviously, some areas you need to also apply for Section 68s. Now, some councils are taking, anywhere from 2 to 3 months to approve Section 68. So it's important to look at that as well and really understand and ensure that it's achievable and workable. And another big factor to look at as well is the slope of the site. Now, if it's a backward sloping site, you still need to determine, can the stormwater be dealt with? Can it be drained, or is an easement required? Is there alternate options? Or is that site just completely discounted because of the way the block's sloping. If it's sloping backwards, maybe it can't be drained. So you still need to comply with that. And another thing to look at is you're still required to get all of the documentation that you would otherwise need. Again, it's a myth. And look, I think it's just maybe it just people haven't been educated clearly enough around this space. But that whole thought of pay $1 and then you submit it all, you download something from the government, you submit it all to the certifier and it gets approved in 10 days. It's not true. You need to engage a draftsperson at the least, or a designer, building designer, who can compile that documentation, firstly put together a set of architectural plans or construction documentation that meets all the criteria for CDC. And the good thing is, yes, it is a lot easier than a custom design, but it still has to be compiled. But then you still need to initiate all of your usual consultants that you would require for a CDC. So you still need to get your structurals, your stormwater. You still need to sort out your landscape. You need to get your NATHERs and BASICs. And the good thing is there's a really good design guideline around the BASICs to suit different areas, and so there's a really good BASICs compliance sheet that comes with each pattern design when you download it, so you can give that straight to your thermal assessor, because they'll obviously need to prepare their thermal assessment over that site. And yeah, you need your typical documentation that you would always need, and you still need to engage a certifier and pay a certifier. And again, certifiers are still working out their fees of what they charge. Look, it's, for terraces, it'll be similar to a usual CDC terraces under the low-rise code, duplex under the CDC low-rise code. It'll be very similar in a lot of aspects. The row homes will be an interesting one because certifiers have never assessed or approved that style of housing. So I think there's a lot of unknowns and a lot of elements in that space. And look, at another thing, just a caveat to look at as well, is just you're limited by facades. Now, the good thing is under the pattern designs, you'll see there's a whole bunch of material changes, colour changes, but again, you're limited. You don't have, like you might go to a project home company and they've got the one floor plan design, but with 10, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 or 3 at bare minimum different facades that you can pick from, like a contemporary or a coastal or a Hamptons or a luxury or a Scandi or whatever it may be. You don't have that option under these pattern designs. You've got essentially a facade, and then you've got some material changes, colour changes. So within reason, you can adapt, but just keep in mind you've got that element too. So I think that's very key, and I think it's important to understand that and to know that you are constrained, yes, firstly by the design. You can't change the design, and secondly, you're very constrained by the facade. And look, and just another thought around it too, and it's just a thought I've got, that I don't believe these pattern designs will work everywhere. There's certain areas where if you're looking to hold these long term, it may be more suitable. But if you're looking at something either to live in, and we've had a lot of clients like want to do a duplex or terraces within the LMR, they might want to live in one, or they want to sell them all, and they're areas that dictate or require a custom design, something more suitable to that site, custom. And because I guess that's for me, and look, this is not to be negative, because I think it's an exciting thing that the government has been proactive in helping deal with housing shortages, and I commend them on this. I'm behind it, I'm backing it, but it's not for everywhere. And look, that's my concern. Sometimes I find government housing or government-styled housing, although they may have been designed by prestigious architects, the problem is it's like anything. When you see too much of something, it loses its aura, it loses its individuality. And you could have the most prestigious architect design a particular design, but the reality is it can get that government look and that government feel, and I think that's my concern, is that it can then fall in that category of some type of government housing, and I've seen it, like where you can just spot government housing, and I guess that's something that could happen, and I think that's where it won't be suitable for everywhere. especially in like high spec'd up or high end areas where it actually might justify more of a customizable approach. It won't work everywhere, but I think people wanting to do long-term holds, and also in councils where they're traditionally very difficult from a DA perspective, I think it makes sense. I think the row homes are going to be one of the biggest draw cards, and that's probably what I'm most excited about in this space. Yes, the dual lock the semi-detached is exciting too, because I think you can do semis now in areas you would not have otherwise been able to do them. But I think in high-end areas, you demand customization. You demand, really just articulating that site and having something individualized. I just don't think it'll work everywhere, but I think from a meeting demand, quick housing, I think it's going to be really exciting and workable. So look, obviously a couple of tools to really get your hands on. Make sure you get your hands on the LMR Spatial Planner. That needs to become your best friend as a first and foremost point to be able to check, is the site first and foremost mapped within the LMR? And then you need to, there's so many tools out there that can help you from a checking point of view. And I've talked about these programs before. Obviously, you got Stash, you got ArchiStar, you got PropCode. There's so many tools out there. Then you've got free tools. Obviously, free tools that you can use as well. Like you can jump onto the New South Wales planner and you can open up the site. You can look at all the overlays, whether it be bushfire, flood, all the different elements that you need to look for. One tool, and we've had them on our episode before, and I'm going to be getting them on again just to talk around this LMR pattern designs, is PropCode. I've found them to be wonderful leaders in this space where they've got terrific software and they've actually embedded now the 8 pattern designs into their software where you can open up a site, you can assess a site under the LMR, and you can actually, their PropCode software will actually really do a lot of the heavy lifting from a planning point of view for you and determine, firstly, can you do a development under the LMR in that site? And secondly, can you use a pattern design on that site? And again, never ever discount still getting it checked thoroughly by planners, designers, professionals in that space, but it's terrific when you're looking and hunting for sites to use that software. And the great thing is you can then download by paying and get a report of that particular site. That way you can grab that report, you can take it to your planning team, your drafting team, your design team, and be able to get them to dig further into that site. So I think that's a really exciting element. So look, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Again, we'll put some links in the show notes just to some of the key things to look at and look for. I hope this has been informative. If you're really excited about looking into that fast track CDC within the LMR using the design pattern books, I think it's a must. Feel free to ask any questions through our social media or emailing us at info@theresidentialdeveloper.com.au. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Feel free to like, share, subscribe, share it with all your friends and family and people you know that are interested in the development space. And we'll see you next week.